The Galactic Assembly had existed for 12,000 years. It was a group of 847 different alien races who had learned to travel between stars. They had built great cities on countless worlds. They had created wonders that most species could not even imagine. And in all that time, they had seen many young civilizations rise and fall. Humanity was the member. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. Their fleet was small. Their territory covered just 47 star systems. To the elder races of the Assembly, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. They were tolerated, but nobody took them seriously. Captain Park stood on the bridge of his ship, the Persistence. It was an old vessel, patched and repaired so many times that almost nothing original remained. But it was his ship, and he loved it like a friend. Through the wide viewport, he watched the stars drift slowly past. They were stationed at the very edge of human space, far from anything important. It was a quiet posting. Some would call it boring, called it peaceful. His tactical officer, Lieutenant, sat at her console nearby. She was young but brilliant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had graduated at the top of her class, and everyone expected her to command her own ship someday. For now, she seemed content to serve aboard the Persistence, though sometimes wondered why she had chosen such an unimportant assignment. The third key member of his crew was Chief Engineer. He was a quiet man who spoke more to machines than to people. His hands were always covered in grease, and his uniform was never quite clean. But there was no better engineer in the entire human fleet. He kept the Persistence running through pure stubbornness, fixing problems that should have been impossible to fix. On this particular day, noticed something strange on her sensors. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but curious, "I am picking up a signal from the dead expanse." Turned to look at her. The dead expanse was a region of space that no one entered. The Assembly had forbidden it thousands of years ago. Ships that went there did not come back. Even the elder races, with all their advanced technology, stayed away. "What kind of signal?" he asked. Studied her screen. "It is repeating, very regular, almost like a pattern." Walked over to her station and looked at the data. The signal pulsed in a steady rhythm. Short bursts, then long ones, then short again. Something about it seemed familiar to him, though he could not say why. "It looks like old Earth maritime code," he said slowly. "The kind ships used to send when they were in trouble, before we had modern communication." Raised an eyebrow. "That is impossible. There are no human ships in the dead expanse. There never have been." "I know," stared at the signal for a long moment. His orders were clear. Patrol the border. Report anything unusual. Do not investigate. The Assembly did not like humans who caused trouble. But something about that signal called to him. It felt wrong to ignore it. What if someone was out there, waiting for help that would never come? He made his decision. "Set a course for the signal source," he ordered. Looked surprised but did not argue. She had served with long enough to trust his instincts. Her fingers moved across the console, and the Persistence turned toward the forbidden zone. Down in the engine room, felt the ship change direction. He did not ask questions. He simply made sure the engines would hold together for whatever journey lay ahead. The trip took 6 hours. As they crossed into the dead expanse, the stars seemed to grow dimmer. There was something heavy about this place, something that pressed against the mind. The crew grew quiet. Even the ship's systems seemed to hum more softly, as if afraid to make noise. Then they found it. Wreckage, hundreds of ships drifting in the endless dark. They were ancient vessels, their designs unfamiliar. Ran a scan and her face went pale. "These ships are 3,000 years old," she whispered. "They belong to the Assembly. This was an exploration fleet." Felt a chill run down his spine. The Assembly had never mentioned losing a fleet here. They had hidden this, buried it in history and hoped everyone would forget. But that was not the most shocking discovery. Beyond the graveyard of ships, something else waited. It was enormous, bigger than any space station had ever seen. It was shaped like a ring, with strange symbols carved into its surface. Lights flickered along its edges, weak but steady. It was still alive. After 3,000 years, it was still working. "What is that?" breathed. His voice came over the communicator from the engine room. He had been watching the sensors too. "It is a gateway," he said. "Or at least that is what it looks like. A door to somewhere else." Stared at the massive structure. The signal was coming from there. Someone or something had been calling for help across the centuries, waiting for anyone brave enough to answer. He thought about the assembly and their rules. He thought about how they looked down on humans. He thought about the fleet of dead ships floating in the darkness. Then he thought about what might happen if he reported this discovery. The elder races would come. They would take control. Humans would be pushed aside just like always. But right now, in this moment, he was the only one here. He had a choice to make. "Bring us closer," said. "I want to see what we have found." The Persistence moved forward, a small human ship approaching something that had waited since before humanity learned to make fire. Whatever happened next, knew that nothing would ever be the same. The universe had been keeping secrets, and humanity had just stumbled onto the biggest one of all. The gateway was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. As the Persistence drew closer, could see the details more clearly. The ring was made of a metal that seemed to shift colors when he looked at it. The symbols carved into its surface glowed with a soft blue light. It was clearly technology, but it felt almost magical. Worked at her console without rest. She was trying to understand the signals coming from the structure. At first, they seemed like random noise, but slowly patterns began to appear. The gateway was not just sending a distress call. It was sending information, lots of information. "I think it is trying to communicate," she said. "But the language is nothing I have ever seen. It is older than any language in the assembly's records." Came up from the engine room to look at the data. His eyes went wide. "These are not just words," he said quietly. "These are instructions. Someone built this gateway and left a manual for how to use it." Felt his heart beat faster. This was the discovery of a lifetime, maybe the discovery of all human history, but he knew he could not keep it secret. He had to report what they had found. He sent a message to the assembly, expecting to wait days for a response. Instead, the answer came in hours, and it was not what he expected. A fleet was coming. 12 elder races had joined together to send their most powerful warships. They would arrive within one day. Their orders were simple: secure the area and prevent anyone from approaching the gateway. But that was not the part that worried. The message also said that the gateway must be destroyed. The assembly had decided that whatever lay beyond was too dangerous to risk. "They are afraid," said. Her voice was angry. "They do not want to understand it, they just want to blow it up." Nodded slowly. He understood fear, but he also understood that destroying something just because you did not understand it was wrong. How many discoveries had been lost because people were too scared to learn? The coalition fleet arrived the next day. 40 warships, each one bigger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. They surrounded the Persistence like wolves around a rabbit. Their leader was High Commander of the Hegemony. They were one of the oldest races in the assembly. They looked like tall, thin creatures with gray skin and eyes that never blinked. His voice came through the communication system, cold and commanding. "Human vessel, you will leave this area immediately. This is now assembly territory. You have no authority here." Kept his voice calm. "High Commander, with respect, we discovered this structure. We have been studying it. We have learned things that might be important." "What you have learned is not relevant," replied. "The gateway is a threat. Our ancestors tried to open it 3,000 years ago. The result was disaster. We will not make that mistake again." "What happened 3,000 years ago?" asked. There was a long pause. When spoke again, his voice was quieter. "They tried to force it open. They used all their power, all their weapons. The gateway defended itself. The entire fleet was destroyed in seconds. Since then, this region has been forbidden, and it will remain forbidden. Looked at, she shook her head slightly. She had already figured out something the elder races had missed. "High Commander," she said, stepping forward to speak into the communicator. "I have been studying the gateway's signals. It is not a weapon. It is a test." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "A test? Little human, you have been here for one day. We have records going back. You cannot possibly understand what this thing is." "Maybe that is exactly why we can understand it," replied. "Your ancestors approached it as a challenge to overcome. They tried to force their way through, but the gateway was not looking for strength. It was looking for something else." She pulled up the data on her screen and sent it to the Coalition fleet. "Look at the patterns. The gateway asks questions. It waits for answers. It measures how the people approaching it behave toward each other. It is testing character, not power." There was silence from the fleet. Could imagine the elder races studying the data, arguing among themselves. They did not want to believe that a young human officer had found something they had missed. Finally spoke again. "It does not matter. The decision has been made. The gateway will be destroyed. You will leave now, or you will be removed by force." Watched as the Coalition ships began to move into attack formation. Their weapons were charging. In minutes, they would fire, and the greatest discovery in galactic history would be reduced to dust. He looked at his small crew, stood ready at her station, watched from the back of the bridge, his face calm. They were just 3 people on an old ship. They had no power, no authority, no way to stop what was about to happen. But they had found something. They had understood something that the elder races could not see, and was not ready to let it go. "We are not leaving," he said. Smiled, nodded. The Persistence held its position as 40 warships prepared to open fire. It was a tiny act of defiance against an entire galaxy, but sometimes that is how the biggest changes begin. Knew that fighting was not an option. The Persistence had 4 small guns. The Coalition fleet had enough firepower to destroy a planet. If he tried to attack, his ship would be gone in seconds. Running away was also pointless. Their engines were too slow. The elder races would catch them easily. So he did something that no one expected. He did nothing at all. Instead of fighting or running, opened a communication channel. Not just to the Coalition fleet, but to everyone. Every ship in the sector. Every space station. Every planet with a receiver. He broadcast on all frequencies, making sure that the entire galaxy could hear what he was about to say. "My name is Park. I am the captain of the human vessel Persistence. I am speaking to you from the dead expanse, where we have made a discovery that will change everything." On the Coalition ships, officers rushed to cut off the signal, but had done something clever with their communication system. She had linked it to the gateway itself, using its ancient technology to boost the signal. It was impossible to block. The whole galaxy was listening. Continued. "Behind me is a structure built by a civilization that existed millions of years before the assembly. They called themselves the Architects. They created this gateway as a test for the younger races that would come after them. But it is not a test of strength or technology. It is a test of character." He paused, letting his words sink in. 3,000 years ago, the ancestors of the elder races came here. They saw the gateway as an obstacle to overcome. They attacked it with all their weapons, and they died. Since then, the assembly has hidden this place. They have called it forbidden. They have kept the truth from everyone. On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, listened with growing anger. "This human is causing a political crisis," he growled to his officers. "Stop him." But his officers could not stop the signal. And worse, they were starting to listen. On ships throughout the fleet, young officers and scientists were hearing words and asking questions. Went on. "The Architects did not want to be conquered. They wanted to see if we could learn to work together. Different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking. They wanted to know if we could put aside our pride and our fear and cooperate for something greater than ourselves. He turned to look at the gateway through the viewport. And now the Assembly has sent a fleet to destroy this place. They would rather blow it up than let humanity be the ones to unlock its secrets. They are making the same mistake their ancestors made. They are choosing power over understanding. Watched the sensor readings. Something was happening in the coalition fleet. Ships were breaking formation. Communication channels were exploding with arguments. The unity that had counted on was falling apart. Made his final move. "I am not asking for a fight," he said. "I am offering an invitation. Come to the gateway with us, not as conquerors but as partners. Let us take this test together. Let us show the architects that the galaxy has learned something in the last 3,000 years." He closed the channel and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a small science vessel from the fleet moved forward. It broke away from the attack formation and drifted toward the Persistence. "What are you doing?" demanded over his command channel. The science vessel's captain responded, "I want to see if he is right. I did not become a scientist to destroy knowledge. I became a scientist to find it." One by one, other ships began to move. Not warships, but research vessels, scout ships, and exploration craft. Their captains were curious. They were tired of being told what to think by politicians and commanders. They wanted to see the truth for themselves. Watched his fleet fall apart. He could order an attack, but half his own ships might refuse to fire. The human had done something impossible. He had turned the coalition against itself without firing a single shot. Brought the Persistence alongside the gateway, and prepared to go aboard. Around them, ships from a dozen different races were gathering, their crews eager to help. "It wants proof," explained as they entered the ancient structure. "The gateway is waiting for proof that we can work together, that we will help strangers even when it is hard, that we choose cooperation over conflict." Nodded, "What kind of proof?" Thought for a moment. Then she began uploading data from the Persistence's computers, not military records or technological achievements. She uploaded something else entirely. Stories, human stories, tales of people helping each other across borders and cultures, records of disaster relief where nations sent aid to their enemies, examples of humans risking their lives to save strangers they had never met, small kindnesses and great sacrifices. The gateway received the data. Its lights began to pulse faster. The symbols on its surface started to glow brighter. And then, with a sound like a giant taking a breath, the gateway began to open. Light poured through the growing portal, brighter than any star. Shielded his eyes but could not look away. He felt something shift in the universe, as if a door that had been locked for millions of years was finally swinging wide. On the Coalition flagship, stood in stunned silence. He had come to destroy a threat. Instead, he watched as a small human crew did what his ancestors had failed to do. They had passed the test, and nothing would ever be the same again. The light faded slowly and opened his eyes. What he saw took his breath away. Through the gateway was another place entirely, a world preserved in perfect stillness. Great towers of crystal rose toward a purple sky. Gardens of strange plants grew in perfect rows, untouched by time, and everywhere there were buildings filled with knowledge. Libraries, thousands of them, millions of books and records and devices that contained more information than the entire assembly had gathered in 12,000 years. The architects had left everything behind, their science, their art, their history, their dreams. Walked forward in wonder. Behind him, scientists and explorers from a dozen different species followed, equally amazed. They had spent their lives studying the universe. Now they stood in a place that made everything they knew seem small. Found a central chamber with a massive screen on the wall. When she approached, it flickered to life. Images appeared showing the architects themselves, They were beautiful beings, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Their faces were kind. A voice spoke, translated automatically into every language present. "Welcome, children of the galaxy. You have found us at last." The message was old. It had been recorded millions of years ago, waiting for this moment. The architects had known that someday someone would pass their test. "We were once like you," the voice continued. "Young, curious, afraid, we made many mistakes, we fought wars. We destroyed things that should have been protected. We learned slowly, but we did learn." The screen showed images of the architects' history, their early struggles, their conflicts, and finally their decision to leave something behind. "When our time came to move beyond this universe, we wanted to give a gift to those who would come after. But we knew that knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. So we created this test. Only those who could work together, who could put aside their differences, who could help strangers without asking for anything in return, only they would be worthy of what we left behind." Was already examining one of the devices nearby. His engineering mind could barely process what he was seeing. "This technology," he whispered, "it could solve every problem we have ever faced. Energy, medicine, transportation, everything." Nodded slowly. He understood the weight of what they had found. This was not just a discovery. This was a responsibility. The Coalition fleet had followed them through the gateway. Even had come his earlier anger replaced by something else. Maybe shame, maybe wonder, maybe both. He approached, his tall gray form casting a long shadow. "You could have kept this for humanity," he said. "You could have used it to become the most powerful species in the galaxy. Why did you invite us?" Looked up at him. "Because that is not why we came out here. We came to explore, to learn, to meet new people and understand new things. If we kept this for ourselves, we would be no better than the ancestors who tried to force the gateway open. We would have failed the test, even after passing it." Was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect among his people, rarely given to anyone outside their own race. "You are strange creatures," he said, "but perhaps that is not a bad thing." In the days that followed, teams from every species worked together to catalog the architect's gifts. The knowledge was shared freely, just as insisted. When the assembly offered humanity a seat among the elder races, he refused. "We do not want to be elder," he told the assembly council. "We want to be partners, equal partners with every species, old and young. That is what the architects wanted. That is what we should want too." His words caused arguments that lasted for weeks. Some elder races did not want to give up their power and privilege, but the truth of what had happened in the dead expanse could not be hidden. Humanity had succeeded where the elder races had failed, and they had succeeded by being generous, not greedy. In the end, a new charter was written. The assembly was reformed. Age and power no longer determined who had a voice. Every species, from the oldest to the youngest, would be heard equally. Was chosen to represent humanity in the new assembly. She accepted the honor with grace, though she would always miss the days aboard the Persistence. Led the scientific expedition to study the architect's technology. Under his guidance, discoveries were made that would change life for billions of beings across the galaxy. And he asked for only one thing: his ship, repaired and ready to fly, and a new assignment far from politics and ceremony. He wanted to explore. On the day he left, came to see him off. "You could have demanded anything," the High Commander said. "Power, territory, revenge for how we treated your kind." Smiled and shrugged. "That is not why we came out here." He boarded the Persistence and flew toward the stars. There was still so much to see, so much to discover, and he had a feeling that the architects had left other gifts hidden in the galaxy, waiting for anyone brave enough to find them. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was just getting started. 50 years passed like water flowing downhill. The galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The knowledge from the architects spread to every corner of known space. Diseases that had killed millions were cured. Planets that had been dying were healed. Ships that once took years to cross the galaxy now made the journey in days. For the first time in history, there was enough for everyone. Hunger became rare. War became rarer. But the biggest change was not in technology. It was in how species treated each other. The old ways of thinking had been built on fear and competition. The strong took from the weak. The old dismissed the young. Everyone fought for their own advantage, and cooperation was just a tool to get ahead. But the lesson of the gateway had spread far and wide. The universe had watched a small human crew choose partnership over power, and something had shifted in the minds of billions. On the reformed assembly world, a great gathering was taking place. It was the centennial celebration, marking 100 years since the assembly was first created. But this year was special. This year, they were also celebrating the 50th anniversary of the gateway's opening. Walked slowly to the speaking platform. Her hair was silver now, and her steps were careful. But her eyes were still sharp, still full of the fire that had driven her as a young officer. Behind her sat representatives from hundreds of species, filling a hall that stretched as far as the eye could see. She looked out at the crowd and smiled. "I was 28 years old when we found the gateway," she began. "I was nobody important, just a junior officer on an old ship with a stubborn captain and a quiet engineer. We had no idea what we were doing. We just knew that something was calling to us from the darkness, and we could not ignore it." The hall was silent. Every being present knew this story. It had been told countless times in countless languages, but hearing it from herself was different. It was like touching history. "Captain made a choice that day," she continued. "He could have followed orders. He could have gone home and let the elder races handle everything. He could have stayed safe. But he believed that discovery mattered more than safety. He believed that reaching out to the unknown was worth the risk." She paused, remembering. "And when the coalition fleet came to destroy the gateway, he made another choice. He could have fought. He could have run. He could have surrendered. Instead, he invited our enemies to become our partners. He showed the whole galaxy that there was another way." In the audience sat beings from races that had not even achieved space travel when the gateway opened. They were here now because humanity had spoken for them. Just as had spoken for cooperation over conquest, had spent her career arguing that every species deserved a voice, no matter how young or small. She looked at the members of the assembly, young species from distant worlds, their eyes full of wonder and hope. "The architects asked us a question," said. "They wanted to know if we could work together, if we could help strangers simply because it was right, if we could be better than our fears." She straightened her old shoulders. "I believe we have answered them. Not perfectly, we still make mistakes, we still argue, we still sometimes forget the lessons we have learned, but we are trying, and that is what matters. That is what the architects wanted to see." Far away, on the edge of explored space, a new signal was detected. A young communications officer stared at her screen in shock. The pattern was unmistakable. It was the same kind of signal that had led the Persistence to the first gateway 50 years ago. Within hours, word had spread across the galaxy. Another structure, another test. The architects had left more than one gift. This time there was no fear. There was no debate about who should respond. A fleet assembled in record time. Ships from 100 different species, crewed by beings who had grown up hearing stories about Captain and his crew. They flew toward the unknown together, without hesitation. Among the fleet was a sleek new exploration vessel. It was called the, named in honor of the man who had changed everything. The captain was a young woman named Park's granddaughter. She had her grandfather's quiet courage and her grandmother's sharp mind. "All ships ready?" she asked over the fleet communication channel. A chorus of voices answered, different languages, different accents, different species, but all saying the same thing. Ready. Smiled. Somewhere she knew her grandfather was watching. He had passed away 10 years ago, peacefully, still dreaming of distant stars. But his legacy lived on in every ship that flew toward the unknown with hope instead of fear. The fleet entered the new sector together. Back on the assembly world, finished her speech. The universe is full of tests, she said. Some are easy, some are hard, some we will fail. But as long as we face them together, as long as we remember that helping others is never a waste of time, I believe we will find our way. She looked out at the gathered representatives, young and old, familiar and strange. The architects believed in us, Captain believed in us, and I believe in us too. The hall erupted in applause. Species that had once been enemies stood side by side, celebrating what they had become. The sound echoed through the chamber and out into the night, rising toward the stars. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the new gateway was waiting, and a fleet crewed by the children of 100 worlds was flying to meet it. The story was not over, it was just beginning again. And humanity had taught the galaxy how to face whatever came next with courage, with kindness, and with open hands. That was the gift they had given to the universe, and the universe would never forget it.